Come closer. I want to tell you about a morning that changed the world. Not through conquest or catastrophe, no. This transformation came quietly. With the shuffle of sandaled feet on stone and the nervous clearing of throats as ordinary men discovered they had voices that could reshape their city. Let me take you there. It begins with a hill. A rocky outcrop west of Athens called the Pnyx, where wild grass grows between limestone ledges and olive trees cast long shadows in the early light. On this particular dawn in the year 508 before the Common Era, something unprecedented is about to happen on this hill. The bronze smith Alexios climbs the slope, his calloused hands still smelling of the forge. Behind him comes Nicias the farmer, dirt beneath his fingernails from yesterday's planting. A merchant named Philon follows, counting his steps as he counts everything else. They do not walk like subjects approaching a throne. They walk like men who suspect they might be free. What happens when power stops flowing downward from kings and gods and tyrants, and begins instead to rise upward from the streets and workshops and fields? What happens when a city decides that wisdom belongs not to the few who claim divine right, but to the many who must live with the consequences of every law? Athens is about to find out. For generations, the city has endured kings, then tyrants, then the suffocating rule of aristocrats who speak of virtue while hoarding grain and gold. But now a man named Cleisthenes has proposed something dangerous, something unthinkable. Rule by the demos, rule by the people themselves. Cleisthenes himself is no common man, born to nobility, educated in rhetoric, scarred by years of political exile when his rivals held sway. But exile teaches hard lessons. It shows you what power looks like from below. I have been powerless, he tells his closest allies, and I have watched good men crushed by those who mistake birth for wisdom. No more. His opponents whisper that he courts the mob from desperation, that no true aristocrat would share authority with potters and fishmongers. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps desperation and justice sometimes wear the same face. Picture Athens as it was then, not the marble wonder of tourist dreams, but a living, breathing city of 40,000 souls. Narrow streets wind between mud brick houses where families crowd around oil lamps, debating the rumors that drift in from the agora. The smell of wood smoke mingles with the salt breeze from Piraeus. Blacksmiths hammer bronze into shields that may never see war. Wine merchants haggle over amphorae filled with vintages from islands whose names sound like music. In the workshops of the Kerameikos district, potters shape clay on wheels that have spun for generations, their hands moving with the same rhythm their fathers knew, their fathers' fathers knew. But now these artisans speak of things their ancestors could never have imagined. We might have a say, whispers the old potter Demetrius, his fingers never pausing in their work. In the laws? In the wars? In how the grain is distributed when the harvest fails? The very air seems to thrum with possibility. In the gymnasia where young men wrestle and debate, conversation turns constantly to Cleisthenes' proposals. 10 new tribes, drawn not from bloodlines but from geography, mixing rich and poor, urban and rural, so that no single family can dominate. A council of 500, chosen by lot from ordinary citizens. And most radical of all, the ecclesia. The assembly, where any citizen may stand and speak his mind before the gathered demos. The aristocrats do not yield easily. They have held power for so long that they cannot imagine Athens without their guiding hands. Chaos, warns Isagoras, Cleisthenes' chief rival, his voice carrying across the agora like the cry of a wounded hawk. Give power to bakers and tanners, and within a year the city will burn. The pressure builds like summer heat before a thunderstorm. Factions form in every neighborhood. Arguments spill from symposiums into the streets. Some call Cleisthenes a visionary. Others name him traitor. The wealthy threaten to withdraw their support from festivals and public works. The poor grow bolder in their demands. Isagoras, desperate now, makes the fatal error of calling in Spartan troops to settle the matter by force. Foreign soldiers in the sacred spaces of Athens. Red-cloaked warriors with iron discipline and contempt for anything that smells of equality. They occupy the Acropolis, expecting the Athenians to submit as subjects have always submitted. Instead, something extraordinary happens. The people rise. Dawn breaks over the Pnyx on the day that will determine Athens' fate. Not just the wealthy now, not just the well-born, but thousands upon thousands of citizens climb the hill. Farmers leave their fields, artisans abandon their workshops. Even slaves who have purchased their freedom join the throng. They come with no weapons but their voices, no armor but their conviction. The rocky slope fills with bodies until the very hill seems to pulse with shared purpose. Below them, Athens spreads like a map of their collective dreams. And there, as the sun climbs higher and the shadows shorten, the assembled citizens of Athens raise their hands and vote to govern themselves. Not in whispers now, not in back rooms where only the privileged may enter, but in the bright morning air where every voice carries equal weight. "Yes," cries Alexius the bronze smith, his arm thrust skyward. "Yes," shouts Nicias, dirt still beneath his nails. "Yes," roars the multitude, and the sound echoes off the surrounding hills like thunder announcing a new age. But let us not paint this moment in colors too bright. This democracy, this rule by the people, who exactly are the people in this brave new world? Not women, surely. They remain in their homes, their wisdom welcomed at hearth and loom but not in the assembly. Not slaves, though they outnumber the free, and their labor builds every temple, fills every granary. Not foreigners, though their trade enriches every harbor, their skills strengthen every craft. The circle of citizenship, however revolutionary, remains a circle, and circles, by their very nature, exclude as much as they embrace. Still, a seed has been planted on this rocky hill. The idea that power need not be inherited, that wisdom need not be aristocratic, that ordinary human beings might be trusted with their own destiny. What followed was not perfection, but experiment. For 2 centuries, Athens would practice this unnatural art of self-governance. Citizens would gather monthly on the Pnyx, debating wars and treaties, taxes and festivals, the price of grain and the meaning of justice. They would make magnificent decisions and terrible ones, sometimes in the same morning session. They would condemn Socrates to death and build the Parthenon. They would create philosophy and perfect slavery. They would invent theater and practice empire. The democracy born on that hill was fragile, imperfect, compromised, and yet it planted seeds that would sprout in Rome and Renaissance Florence, in Philadelphia and Paris, in squares and streets across the centuries whenever ordinary people decided they had voices worth hearing. Every revolution since has carried, consciously or not, an echo of that morning when Athenian citizens climbed a hill and chose to trust themselves. The Pnyx still rises west of Athens, though the city below has grown beyond recognition. Tourists sometimes visit, guided by books that explain the semicircular stone platform where speakers once stood, the earthen slopes where thousands once gathered to argue and vote and dream. But if you come at dawn, when the light falls as it fell that morning 25 centuries ago, you might sense something more than history in the stones. You might feel the weight of all those voices, raised not in supplication to kings, but in conversation with equals. The hill remembers what it means to be the place where people first discovered they could govern themselves. And sometimes, in the early light, it still seems to echo with that first great yes.